The last visitor of Castle Vorath. The road to Castle Vorath had not been traveled by choice in over a century. Yet, here was Damian Marrow, an antiquarian by trade and a fool by circumstance, climbing the broken switchbacks of the Carpathian foothills with a letter clutched inside his coat. The letter had arrived 3 weeks earlier, sealed in black wax, bearing the impression of a wolf devouring its own tail. It offered him a sum so absurd for the cataloging of a private library that he had not stopped to question why no one else had answered the advertisement first. He understood why when he saw the castle. It rose from the mountainside like something grown rather than built, its towers climbing to heights that defied the ambitions of any century he recognized. The windows were dark even at dusk, save for a single amber glow in the highest spire, flickering like a heartbeat. No birds circled the towers. No moss softened the stone. The silence around Vorath was not the silence of abandonment, but the silence of something listening. A manservant met him at the gate, a thin, pale figure named Tobias, who said almost nothing and moved with the careful economy of a man who had learned long ago that wasted motion drew attention. He led Damian through a courtyard where the fountain had run dry decades before, the basin filled instead with dead leaves arranged in unsettlingly neat spirals, as though someone swept them daily out of habit rather than purpose. The library, when Damian finally saw it, justified every mile of the journey. Shelves climbed 40 feet into shadow, packed with volumes bound in leather that had not seen daylight since the Enlightenment. The air smelled of dust, tallow, and something else underneath it. Something coppery that Damian chose not to examine too closely. His employer received him that first night in a drawing room lit by a single branch of candles. Count Vorath was tall, dressed in clothing that might have been fashionable during the reign of an emperor whose name Damian could not place, and possessed of a stillness that unsettled more than any movement could have. When he spoke, his voice carried the cadence of a man translating his thoughts from a much older language. You will find the lower shelves contain correspondence, the Count said. Family matters. Tedious, but I am told historians value tedium above all else. The upper shelves are not to be touched. Of course, Damian said, though he had already noticed the ladder reaching toward those forbidden heights, its rungs worn smooth in the middle, as if climbed often by someone who never asked permission of himself. For 3 days, Damian worked from dawn until the Count summoned him each evening for a meal neither of them ate. The Count claimed a delicate constitution. Damian claimed a full stomach from earlier in the day. Neither believed the other, and both found the arrangement convenient. The cataloging proved genuinely fascinating. Letters from merchants describing trade routes long since swallowed by changing borders. diaries from a woman who signed herself only as the Countess, and wrote of a husband who traveled constantly, yet was somehow always present at the window when she woke. Records of births and deaths in the village below, the latter category swelling unnaturally during certain years, always followed by a note in different ink. Resolved. On the fourth night, Damien could not sleep. The castle had a way of breathing, stone settling and timber groaning in patterns that almost resembled words if he listened too long. He lit a candle and decided that if rest would not come, productivity might fill the hours instead. He told himself the upper shelves were simply the next logical section to catalog. He told himself the Count would understand the academic curiosity. He told himself several things as he climbed, and believed none of them, which did not stop his hands from continuing upward. The books on the highest shelf had no titles on their spines. The first he opened was not a book at all, but a ledger, its pages filled with names in a dozen different hands across what must have been centuries, each entry followed by a date and a single Latin word. Traditus. Surrendered. Damien's grasp of dead languages was rusty but functional enough to feel the floor tilt slightly beneath him. The names continued for pages, decades, some entries clustered tightly together, others separated by gaps of 20, 30, 50 years, as though the keeper of the ledger had grown patient or careful, or simply tired of variety. Near the final entries, the handwriting changed to something modern, something that matched the careful copperplate Damien had seen on his own letter of invitation. The most recent name on the list was dated 11 years prior. Beneath it, the space remained empty, waiting the way a held breath waits for release. You found my accounting. Damien did not startle, which surprised him more than the Count's silent arrival. Some part of him had been waiting for this moment, since he first saw the leaning towers from the road. "It isn't what you think," Damien said, immediately recognizing the absurdity of the claim, since he had no idea what he thought, only that the empty space beneath the final name had begun to feel less like an ending and more like an invitation. The Count moved to the window, where the mountains had turned the color of old bruises beneath the moon, 2 nights from full. Every keeper of this house has stood where you stand. Every one of them told themselves they were merely curious. Curiosity is simply the polite name we give to hunger before we recognize it as our own. I don't understand. You will. The Count's reflection did not appear in the window glass, though his voice carried the weary patience of someone who had delivered this explanation many times before, and found no version of it shorter. This house does not choose its guests at random, Mr. Marrow. The advertisement found its way only to those who already stood at the edge of something. A man drowning in debts no honest trade could settle. A scholar whose name had been erased from every faculty that once respected it. a woman who had buried 3 husbands and wished, quietly, to stop counting. Damien thought of his own circumstances, the antiquarian shop failing behind him in the city, the creditors who had begun to use a tone he recognized from nightmares, and felt something cold settle into his chest that had nothing to do with the draft from the window. What happens to the names in the ledger? Some refuse and leave this house exactly as they entered it, only faster, and rarely by the front gate. The Count's expression did not change, though something in his stillness sharpened. Others examine what is offered and decide that an eternity spent paying a single debt is preferable to a lifetime spent paying many. I do not lie to them about the cost. I only ask whether the life they currently hold is one worth the desperate clinging most mortals practice out of habit rather than conviction. And if I refuse? Then Tobias will see you safely to the village by morning, your fee paid in full, your memory of this place softened by degrees until it resembles a dream you once had and mostly forgot. The Count finally turned from the window. I find that honesty serves better than threat. Fear makes for unreliable companions, and I have had centuries of disappointing company already. Damien looked down at the ledger, at the empty space waiting beneath the final entry, and understood that the true horror of Castle Vorath was not the possibility of the offer, but the unbearable seduction of it. Here was a man, or whatever the Count had become, offering not chains but a door, and asking only that Damien admit what he already suspected about the life he had been living so carelessly outside these walls. Why tell me any of this? Why not simply take what you want? Because I am tired, the Count said, and for the first time something almost human moved behind his ancient eyes. Tired of guests who scream, and guests who beg, and guests who never once ask themselves whether the screaming was honest or merely expected of them. You climbed my forbidden ladder out of curiosity, Mr. Marrow, not duty. That distinction matters more than you know. Damien closed the ledger slowly, the leather cool beneath his fingers. I need until morning. You have until the candle in my window burns out, which I find generally amounts to the same courtesy. The faintest suggestion of a smile crossed the Count's face. Take your time. I have nothing left but that. He left Damien alone among the towering shelves, footsteps making no sound on the ancient floor. Damien sat with the ledger open across his knees, listening to the castle breathe around him, and found that he could not immediately decide which terrified him more, the offer itself, or how long he sat there genuinely considering it before the candle in the distant window finally guttered into darkness. When dawn broke over the Carpathians, Tobias found the library empty, the ladder still extended toward the forbidden shelf. and the ledger closed upon a desk that had not held it the night before. Whether Damien Marrow walked down the mountain road that morning, or whether his name had simply joined the others in patient copperplate ink, was a detail the castle kept to itself, the way it had always kept its secrets, the way it always would, waiting with the particular patience of something that had long since stopped measuring its hunger in mere mortal years.